right, hello Gator Nation. We are fortunate to have with us today Tony Davis, financial advisor with Merrill Lynch, and more importantly, University of Florida alumnus. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, happy to be here.
All right, so let's start. If you could take us through maybe when you graduated from UF, through your career path thus far, and talk a little bit about what your current role is with Merrill Lynch.
Awesome. So my path's been a little bit different. I got here to Gainesville in late 2006, and then I was on a baseball scholarship, so was here for 3 years, 2007, 8, 9. Ended up getting drafted my junior year, so I actually had a full year of classes left, but I went to pursue that dream, and that was parts of about 6 years, and then so it's kind of more recently that I actually secured my degree.
Okay.
But although I feel like it was, I was learning a lot along the way.
Sure.
So, and then I had a clear vision of what I wanted to do post baseball, but you know, I think sometimes our thoughts are a little bit easier. You know, the whole process of it being laid out was not as easy. So it was another, call it a couple years of knocking on doors and getting a lot of no's before you get the right yes. So, which is where I'm at now.
So could you talk a little bit about what your current role is with Merrill Lynch?
Definitely. So I met a gentleman who I hit it off with, who is a financial advisor, and he specializes in the area of sports, and more specifically baseball and football. As you know, just kind of everybody knows a little bit, that world is fast moving. There's a lot of money being thrown around, and you know, it kind of has a reputation of, you know, reckless spending. So it's with my background and having played and having signed early and getting a bonus and kind of seeing that whole process, I can relate pretty well to those guys, and it's amazing the work I see that goes into it and that's being done for them. It's awesome to see. So
you work specifically with baseball players?
I do baseball, yeah.
Okay.
I do baseball.
And so you go out there and you find clients, and then you work with them as they go through the process of building budgets and identifying appropriate ways to start saving.
Exactly. But I mean, really for them, budgeting is huge. And I'm surprised most of them really have never established any credit. Just you know, a 401k is extremely foreign to them. So I kind of take them through the process. When it comes to the investments, we typically take it a little slower in the beginning with the younger guys, because you know, the market is unpredictable. As much as anybody says they know what, you know, they know what it's going to do, they don't. So it's about protecting them, and in the beginning it's more capital preservation than you know, than the extreme growth, you know, because at 18 years old, when you get $1 million, you know, you have a lot of years to grow that. So we introduce them, we educate them. I tell all my guys, you're going to be the smartest guy in the locker room when it comes to your finances, you know, and if you're not, we're going to get you there. And fortunately, I've been really lucky with the guys I work with. They all are eager to learn. They take our relationship as me mentoring them, as opposed to me telling them what to do. So it's been very smooth and very rewarding.
So I'm going to venture a guess that this is not an easy question to answer, but what's a typical day look like for you?
So for me, I think I have to blend my days. It's split into a few different categories. Part of my day is, of course, the relationship part, and you know, calling people, and I have to travel. You know, it's pretty flexible. I don't have to. It's the farthest thing from a 9 to 5. It's you know, you're really never off. But with that said, there's also days where you can kind of, you know, make things more flexible, and it's a good balance. It's a good lifestyle. I also put a lot of time and effort into learning, you know, because I've been in it for a couple years now. I have a huge support staff with my team that I work with, but you know, I'm in the process of getting my CFP, which is a certified financial planner. You know, even just reading the Wall Street Journal, just things like that, and really knowing what's going on, because it's very important to me to know exactly what I'm talking about and
Sure.
make sure my guidance is appropriate. So.
Sure. Now, media obviously portrays athletes as having very bad money habits, right? We read stories all the time about a player going bankrupt or going through, large amounts of dollars that most of us wouldn't see in a normal lifetime. I'm just curious about someone that works in that space. What are your experiences with those sort of generalizations? Are they accurate? Are they?
Yeah, I mean they are accurate. I think that now more than ever, the thing that these young guys are dealing with is the pressures of the world in terms of social media.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that there's an expectation that, all right, so you're young, you just got a huge check, you're at some points wealthier than a lot of people who are older than you. You should have a really, really nice car and a really big house.
Sure.
And you should have the nicest clothes. And I think that regardless of the upbringing, regardless of anything like that, it's very easy to fall into that kind of mentality if you don't have guidance. So, and again, I tell my guys, I say, if you want a nice, I always joke with them, a lot of them like shoes too. If you want a nice kick game, I'm not going to say you can't, I'm not telling you not to buy shoes, but it comes to the bigger purchases that really throw them off. So,
Sure.
If a kid spends, $500, a year or every 6 months on shoes, that's not going to be, in my opinion, detrimental to his overall financial health. It's pulling the trigger on $1 million house when you only have $2 million to your name and stuff like that. So I think social media puts a lot of pressure on young guys to try and keep up. I think that's a big thing, and so we deal with that. And at the same time, there's other players that totally couldn't care less, and they just do their own thing. So.
And I think the population is obviously very different than the population of that other wealth managers or financial advisors work with. The earning pattern is obviously very different, right? A typical career person would, their earnings would increase over time. Obviously, in this case, the earnings sort of come heavy early in the carear. Can you talk about just the differences in working with a professional athlete versus people on other career paths?
Absolutely. So with a lot with our young baseball players, baseball is a little different than some other sports where with football and basketball, you're a high draft pick, you're pretty much going to the league. With baseball, you could be the #1 overall pick and never make it to the big leagues. Happens a lot more than a lot of people think. So it becomes it's a very customized strategy for all those guys where big chunk of money, and now we have to act like you're never going to get money like that in your entire life.
Yeah, sure.
And then if they make it to the big leagues and they sign another big contract, we can, kind of rotate a little bit. But again, hypothetically, you give $1 million to a young kid, it should set him up for a great life. I'm not saying that, he can retire.
Yeah, sure.
But depending on what he wants to do, some guys could retire if they want to live very modestly, but it should set them up the right way. And that's kind of my thoughts on that. So
I'm curious about unique challenges. You referenced it a little bit there with just the fact that a lot of these kids are very young. I'm curious, are the challenges come into play because of the size of the bonuses they're coming to play with, or is it the lack of maturity from some of these kids? Just again, at 18, I would think that'd be very difficult to sort of process.
Definitely. I think maturity is the right word. It's not that they're immature. It's just that I always try and put myself in their shoes.
Yeah, sure.
And I was in their shoes on some level. I was a little bit older. I had some college under my belt. I wasn't, the bonus I received wasn't as substantial, as it wasn't life-changing. So I try to be realistic and put myself in their shoes. But definitely, that's a really big thing. Is just the egos, the egos, and not everybody wants to work with somebody like us, and because they don't think they need it.
Sure.
So it's not for everybody. But the good part about that is that the guys that we do have, they've made a conscious decision that they've seen a need. I need help with this area. I don't want to mess up.
Yeah.
So usually it's not, I don't need help, but I'll hire you anyways. So it's really smooth, in my opinion, on our end. The guys we have, there is no, not a lot of drama. It's pretty smooth sailing. So.
And I would think, obviously, relationships play a big part in this, right? Developing trust.
Yeah,
I would guess that your playing days provide some sort of street cred for you as you develop these relationships with these kids.
I think so. I mean, having been through it, and I try to always take the job description a step further and let them know that this is, while still being encouraging, and, I kind of structure it like, we hope you play for 20 years. If you play for 10, you've done really well. Some guys play for 5. You just don't know. But the bottom line is, even if you have a career that lasts 20 years, you're going to be 40 years old.
Sure.
So this relationship, it's going to go beyond that. You're going to want to do something else. You might want to start a business. You might want to. So this is more than just, with the agent thing, with guys that are agents, they're so important during the playing days, but as soon as they're over, it's kind of like, we had a great time.
Sure,
we'll talk around the holidays, and that's it. But with us, it's pretty much, this is a lifelong thing, as long as everything's good between us. So.
Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of this space? I'm thinking, a few years ago, you didn't hear a lot about people specializing in this niche, but there's obviously, it's obviously, again, a very different group of people you're working with here. So can you just talk a little bit about, I guess, the evolution of wealth management within this professional athlete space over the last 5-10 years?
I just think the need for it was becoming more apparent.
Okay.
I think, it's easy to find a ton of stories of the Mike Tysons, there's a lot of hands going in the cookie jar with these athletes. They have a lot of people following them and kind of trying to feed off of them. So I think it became more apparent that there was a need for that. And I give a lot of credit to the athletes themselves, because I think you see, you take like the LeBron Jameses, and that's obviously on one extreme. I mean, that is the extreme of the extremes. But you see a lot of guys that are really branding themselves in incredible ways, and they look at themselves. I know, like LeBron James, I know he views himself as a businessman.
Without a doubt.
So he's one of the greatest athletes on the earth, but he's also a businessman, and he really puts a lot of thought into those decisions. And I think a lot of guys are seeing that and want to do the same things. I mean, I see a lot of guys, a lot of young minor league guys now doing different, clothing. They're kind of starting their own little clothing lines. They're getting trademarks, and the wheels are spinning. And I think with that it comes, it kind of matures them a little quicker. So I think it's evolved in a really good way. I think that it'll continue to do that. And again, there's, in my space, I know of other people that do the same type of thing, but that's the way anything is. There's got to be a diverse crowd.
And that's interesting, because that brings up to an earlier point you made, rather than just preserving the capital, if all of a sudden they're looking to really look at that money as seed money to invest in developing a brand. And you see that as a continuing trend.
Definitely. I think so. Yeah. And there's a lot of situations where growth is in the portfolio is key. So depending on, it's really, I haven't really even mentioned this yet, but it's whatever they want. We sit down with them, and some guys are very specific, and they say, I'll use the number, if they have $25 million, they say, listen, we'll select a fixed income portfolio, a bond portfolio, because they say, this is what I want every year. I want my $25 million to stay there. I don't want it to go down. I don't care if it goes up. So that guy's different from someone who says, I have $10 million and I'd like to take a portion of it and start to grow it a little bit more aggressively. And but with this area, I think that it's very important, and all of our guys know very well that it's of course, the greater risk, the greater reward is,
Sure,
and vice
sure,
versa.
sure, without a doubt.
So, we make sure they know the historical trends and what
Yeah.
to expect and not to freak out. We focus on economics over emotions.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's kind of the key.
I would think that'd be especially difficult with athletes who have seen incremental gains as they
Yeah.
work towards something, to be exposed to something that's more cyclical in nature. I think that'd be very challenging.
Absolutely. And we err on the side of, if they kind of leave it up to us, it's all about protecting them.
Sure.
Because again,
Sure.
why does somebody who has 25 million need 30? So
Yeah, sure.
so typically they agree that they don't. Unless they want to really get into something different that's kind of an alternative, where they know people who, are opening up Chick-fil-A's, and we don't do that stuff. But if they have that kind of mindset, then,
Yeah, sure.
then go for it. But
Sure.
so that's
So I'll ask you to put the futurist hat on a little bit. I like to always ask industry professionals that I talk to, where do they think their field is going? So I'll ask you, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if we were having this conversation, what would we be talking about as sort of the emerging trend that's happening?
Ooh, good question. I think that I'm going to stick with the marketing and the branding.
Okay.
I think that you'll see athletes used in a way that isn't even thought of now. I think that, that their platform is going to be even bigger, just like entertainers, and whether people want to admit it or not, those guys have a huge voice.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that I think it's going in the correct direction. So I think 10, 15 years from now, this conversation will be, we would have looked back and said, we've come a long way.
Yeah,
That's what
sure.
I think. So
Sure.
that's
All right, so I always like to shift at the end of the conversation to getting a little bit of advice or insights from you to either our current students or young alums. So I'm curious, if someone's interested in getting into this space at some point, are there certain types of experiences they should be pursuing now to prepare themselves?
Okay. Really, it's you hear it a lot, and I know you guys talk to your students about this, but the relationships are just they're so valuable, because no matter how shiny your resume is and so on and so forth, it really is a much more difficult road just submitting a cold resume than when you know somebody and say, hey, I just submitted my resume, make sure they take a look.
Yeah, sure.
So the relationships is huge. And then I'm really big on, especially since I stopped playing, the idea of a year. I always like to use the example of 1 year. It's a long time. It doesn't feel like a long time. A lot of times it goes very fast.
Yeah.
But if I always encourage when I'm talking to people, if you really structure your day every day for a year, you'd be amazed at how much can change.
Yeah.
So start somewhere, learn as much as you can, and but you have to you can't just take a couple months off mentally. That's what I think. I think that you're not going to, the spot that I am currently in now was behind the scenes. I mean, my wife will tell you, my personal therapist will tell you that there's a lot of there's way more disappointment before there's any kind of reward.
Okay.
And I think that sometimes it's students don't see that coming. So you got to have thick skin and just kind of not be afraid to evolve and change, and whenever you want. It's your life. So
I think those are great tips and advice to sort of leave it at. So I appreciate you taking the time today. It was great to chat with you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
as always, go Gators.
Absolutely.